Story 1. I'm not staying in one place. Being unchanging and immortal would raise red flags too easily. Story 2. Probably Southern California. The stories of what it looked like before farming took over sound unreal. No palm trees. Just beautiful and bountiful forests with a bit cooler Southern California weather. Story 3. Probably Jerusalem. I would want to have a discussion with this Jesus fellow and find out exactly what his father had in mind so we could clear up a lot of misunderstanding and confusion in the future, and hopefully avoid many deaths attributed to religious differences. Story 4. Jerusalem. I will hide in the caves beneath the temple with the Ark and the ghost of Jeremiah. Nobody has discovered what is down there yet. Story 5. Can I also be turned into a man along with all this other magical stuff happening? I would not want to be a woman in past times. Story 6. Whichever place has the least chance of being colonized or affected by war for the next 1,000 years. Immortality does not imply invincibility. Story 7. England. Hoard gold in buried caches. Since the Romans, gold has been used frequently. The weather is mild, with no significant natural disasters. For the final 400 years, dig it up and assume the identities of various generations of a wealthy, reclusive family. During their peak years of global expansion, this would enable you to amass more wealth through trade. As modern times approach, retire to a private island and enjoy the next 1,000 years. Story 8. Send me back to the first city or Atlantis, somewhere far in the past. I would like to see it all. I will move around as needed from there. If I go back with all my current knowledge, I will accelerate the development of many things. Next time I return to 2025, we will be on Mars. Story 9. Texas Gulf Coast. The Karankawa natives were tall, dark-skinned individuals known for their friendliness towards the Europeans they encountered, almost worshipping them. There was plenty of food available. I am skilled at coastal fishing and foraging and know to stay away from the Alamo. Story 10. If I have immortality, why do I need to try and survive? I could do anything and endure. I could summit Mount Everest in the nude, dive to great depths without an oxygen supply, walk through an active volcano, or go to Nazi Germany and confront Hitler just to defy him. If I were given immortality, I wouldn't focus on survival. I would explore the limits of what I could endure. Story 11. I wish it had been more than 2,000 years. Then I would choose the Garden of Eden and eat the fruit of knowledge since I am already immortal. Story 12. I would likely start in the highlands and proceed from there, moving around to avoid being noticed. If someone asks, I will say I am his son or grandson. Story 13. I get bored on Tuesday evenings after Real Housewives of New York. I don't want to be immortal at any age. There is also the idea of existing as a naked consciousness, enduring the eternity of the heat death of the universe, starting with 10 raised to the power of Googleplex and lasting at absolute zero, beyond forever. What would I do with true immortality and no Real Housewives? Story 14. I would start in Jerusalem and follow Jesus to learn from him. After that, it depends on the nature of immortality. It seems that, based on the wording of the post, aging does not occur, but one can still be killed, indicating a lack of invulnerability. In that case, I would need to move around frequently to avoid suspicion of witchcraft due to not aging. I would likely travel from one country to the next, depending on what feels right, and try to see as much of the world as possible. I would continue this until I can sail to North America, then head west and attempt to befriend the natives while still traveling extensively and exploring the continent before modern development takes over. If invulnerability is indeed the case, the timeline may change a couple of times as I attempt to intervene in various historical events. Story 15. Jerusalem. If given the opportunity to see the Master teach in person, I would take the risk in the Middle East during biblical times. Story 16. I am roaming around Europe and becoming a legend. A mysterious man who stays for a year and leaves for 30. He comes back the same age, never changing. I thought it said 1,000. Even better. I watch all of these empires fall and advise the new ones, helping them to avoid their fates. It is too late for Rome, but I could change the world for better or worse. The Norse might never convert, and if they do, at least I will record their myths the way they knew them. Story 17. If I have to choose one location, somewhere in northern Canada appears to be the least likely to lead to issues. Story 18. I would dress up as a knight from the Crusades and sit in a cave in the Middle East with a desk full of different cups and a pond. Story 19. Scotland. If you're pursuing immortality, do it the right way. Use Spanish or Egyptian, whatever. Story 20. I want a timeline of locations and events programmed in my mind so I know where to be and when to witness everything happening. Story 21. Only 2,000 years ago. I would be sad. You're missing some peak history around 2000 BC. I would start in Mesopotamia and then move every few decades to explore a new culture. I would really love to see the Assyrian and Mesopotamian temples in their original glory. Story 22. Okay, wait. Going back 2,000 years and being immortal, disease would not be much of a problem for my survival. However, I have lived in the 21st century. Does this immortality prevent me from passing on things unique to the 21st century? I have many curiosities I would love to satisfy, but accidental genocide is not on my to-do list. Story 23. To the year 25, Rome. Then Ravenna for a while. Then Constantinople. Then probably Spain. Then England. After that, I will keep a low profile until crossing the Atlantic isn't a total death wish. Eventually, I invest all my money in GameStop. Story 24. Somewhere warm, coastal, and worshipping goddesses. I'm living like a Mediterranean beauty in ancient Greece, captivating philosophers and thriving on olives and power. Story 25. What kind of immortality is this? Do we simply not age, yet can still be killed by a bullet to the head or decapitation? Or are we unkillable? Story 26. Lay low for a couple thousand years. I would dig out a lair under the Himalayas. I would develop a race of super soldiers, destroy the warlords, and then use my next generation of super soldiers to eliminate the first generation. With humanity united under one banner, I will lead them to the stars. Story 27. Ancient Persia. I am Persian and might look like I belong. Language is the challenging part, but I am sure I would figure something out. Story 28. Being a woman limits where I can feel safe. Immortality does not mean that I would not still be imprisoned, tortured, or forced into slavery. If I had the funding to travel safely, I would explore Egypt. I would also love to visit ancient China. Story 29. If I were immortal, I would explore for a while. I would walk across the bottom of the ocean and sleep naked on the top of Mount Everest. Then I would come down, proclaim myself a god, and rule the world. Story 30. I would travel the world changing history, mostly erasing individuals who caused significant global issues. While I won't share my entire list, some names are quite obvious. Christopher Columbus, Hernan Cortez, Adolf Hitler, Frederick T. Ronald Reagan, Margaret Thatcher, Joseph Stalin, Mao Zedong, Benito Mussolini, Joe Rogan. Story 31. Can I bring back a crate of Mi-16s and 1,000 crates of bullets? Because that would change things. Or to quote Missouri Sislak, now to go get me some caveman hookers. Story 32. The southeastern part of what is now called North America. I would become a god emperor and enjoy myself when the Europeans arrived. Story 33. Well, immortality would be quite unfortunate if I went somewhere and they buried me alive because I was seen as a demon or heretic. Could I at least bring a laptop with an atomic battery and a couple of hundred games? Additionally, having the entire Wikipedia downloaded onto it would keep me busy while I'm in my tomb. Story 34. Can't die no matter what. Immortality? If that's the case, I would prefer to be somewhere on the south side of the Canadian Shield to avoid being buried alive by an earthquake, pulled out to sea by a tsunami, or smashed by a hurricane. Being immortal and enduring all of that without current structures would be difficult. The Canadian Shield has water, decent but cold weather, and abundant wildlife over the last 2,000 years. Story 35. Rome. Although it lost power over a long period, it remained a central hub and was never truly destroyed. Travelers could navigate much of the known world during that time. Story 36. There is no way you will not be found out. It may sound silly to reference a movie, but The age of Adeline demonstrated that people will notice and take measures to contain you. However, I think one could live in Alaska alone for a century or so to remove oneself from society and possibly get away with it. I am uncertain if Alaska existed during the time of Pangaea, as I did not study that period. Story 37. I'm likely in the same place I am right now. I know more about or locations, historical caves, and minerals in this area than in other places. It would be frustrating to learn precise locations for these resources in other countries, especially during the initial weeks, months, or years. I would prefer to establish a Bronze Age-like civilization with a touch of modern society here first. Story 38. I had become a traveling nomad to learn. I would probably start writing down each thing gradually so that if I needed to hide or protect it, I could. I wanted to preserve hundreds of texts of history to learn from and keep alive. I aimed to explore different parts of the world and understand how they have changed over time. Perhaps I would even become a cryptic figure or a deity unintentionally. Story 39. Explore the Roman Empire and spend the next 2,000 years traveling back and forth to East Asia, with a couple hundred-year detour to America in the 16th century. Story 40. With the wording here, I would like to point out that immortality isn't limited, so survival isn't the problem. It's not being a religious figure, as being immortal technically means you can't be killed. The question is about remaining more anonymous than about surviving. Story 41. As a middle-aged woman, there is only one hope, and that is America with native tribes. Over there, in the development of Western civilization, my demographic has been disadvantaged for most of the last 2,000 years. Story 42. Australia. Hopefully, at my peak biological age, I will be a competent mechanical engineer. By the time the first fleet arrives, I will have already brought Australia to the industrial age, allowing the people of this land to truly take advantage of all the natural resources available to them and make Australia a global superpower. Story 43. I would try to make it to London. It would be easy enough to learn the languages of the Romans and the Celts, and I would be able to claim a piece of property where I could theoretically stay until the modern era. Story 44. I think I would go to California. The weather is nice, and the crops are abundant. There are very few people. There are many things to try and invent, and by the time Europeans arrive across the ocean, I should have a good society in place. Story 45. Option 1. South Island of New Zealand. There are very few predators large enough to harm me and abundant resources. I won't have to worry about other people arriving for about 800 years. However, 800 years alone could become quite boring. Hopefully, Moa tastes good. Option 2. Big Bone Lick, Kentucky. North America's original Serengeti, it is absolutely loaded with game. I would need to stay alert to ward off large predators and may have to pose as a deity to create a sufficient base of human protection to survive tribal warfare. Immortality would assist with that, making the first lifetime the most challenging. Option 3. Tahiti. It boasts lush abundance, but there are some very tough neighbors either coming or already present, including active cannibalism. Again, I better be convincing as a deity. Story 46. Somewhere closer to the equator at that time, if I need to survive for longer days, I can't be freezing to death while looking for food and shelter. Story 47. Funny, but this is the first time I've pondered one of these hypotheticals since having a child and getting married. My first thought was that if I couldn't bring my family, then I wouldn't want to do it. Missing my child growing up and growing old with my wife is not worth it. Now, if they could join me and share in the whole immortality concept, I would choose the Lycian Peninsula in modern Turkey. All of the brilliance of Central Asia flowed through there on its way to ancient Greece and Europe. The year 25 CE would be a great time to be there, and I could slowly introduce modern mathematics to wandering nomads, kickstarting intellectual revolutions centuries ahead of time. Imagine if calculus were discovered 1,400 years sooner, or if modern germ theory emerged earlier. No plague, earlier industry, and the chance to shape philosophy and politics toward harmony while preserving our best qualities. You could even chat with Christ himself if the timelines from the religious texts are at all accurate. I believe my goals would be best accomplished by setting up a nice inn along the Silk Road for the first 100 years or so. Then I might move to Istanbul or Rome and see how things are working out. Perhaps I would get more directly involved with developing technology. Story 48. Highlander-type immortality is likely found somewhere in the US. You could start collecting gold and other rare earth elements. Story 49. Probably Athens. Rome was ascendant, but I suspect Athens was still the center of learning and, as part of the Roman Empire, was fairly safe. Even after Rome fell, it remained a crossroads, and wars seemed to have missed it. I would collect a copy of every lost great work, including, hopefully, a full version of Aeschylus Achilles, and find out what really happened during the Trojan War. I would also collect all Roman texts that the Christians destroyed. Somehow, I would have to get to the New World because I want to obtain full copies of the Mayan codices before the Spanish, again Christians, destroyed them. Story 50, Judea, because I would like to see Jerusalem before the Romans burned it down and named it Palestine. Also, living in the early Roman Empire would be exciting. Story 51. I would stay on the outskirts of civilization and become a trader, allowing me to travel unnoticed without aging. Additionally, earlier civilizations often enslaved strangers, so it would be unwise to linger in any one place for too long. Story 52. Become the reincarnation of Jesus in 0025 and prove you are the Son of God by living for another 2,000 years. Story 53. Mauritius. Peace and quiet for 1,500 years living on dodo meat. Then I only have to get through 500 years elsewhere. Story 54. A typical answer for these kinds of questions is to buy Bitcoin and stock. In 25 AD/CE, regardless of where we go, we help reduce the population with our modern diseases. Or do we have protection, and do diseases not exist? Story 55. You don't have to try and survive if you're immortal. You just do. However, if you want to go live alone in paradise for the first 1,500 years or so, I recommend the island of Madeira. Story 56. An untouched, unpopulated paradise-like desert island in the most beautiful part of the South Pacific. Story 57. I would go to Jerusalem and take Jesus' place before he starts preaching. Being immortal, crucifixion wouldn't work, so everyone would know when I rose from the grave. I would use this to convert the masses to my new religion and become the God Emperor of Earth. Then I would skip the Dark Ages and go straight to the Enlightenment. I know enough about various subjects that we could really jumpstart modernity. Working with the smartest minds of the day, we could recreate a lot of technology within a few hundred years. Story 58. Define immortal. Does it mean you need someone to kill you to die? Will falling off a building kill you? What about disease or lack of food, water, or nutrients? Story 59. My definition is that if you are immortal, you don't have to try to survive because you survive no matter what. As for location, I would probably strive to reach the Chinese imperial court. I suspect that it was the most technologically advanced place and offered the best opportunity for a good quality of life 2,000 years ago. Story 60. Aztec and Mayan civilization. I am trying to be a god. We will prepare for the colonist invasion 2,000 years in advance. They think we have bows and arrows until they are hit with some advanced weaponry. Story 61. Nowhere. Thanks. I could be in today's world and I'm fine. I don't need to see 2,000 years. Surviving, but I'm immortal? At best, I'm at the bottom of a lake. Worst case, large-scale starvation or plague. I'm good on that, but thanks for the opportunity. Story 62. The Caribbean warned inhabitants of the impending arrival of Europeans and established several cultural practices to eliminate any uninvited guests. They moved to other locations to avoid suspicion of not aging, not wanting to be labeled as demons. Story 63. I mean, I am immortal, so I would survive no matter what. I could probably convince some ancient sect of monks that I am a Buddha just by hanging out without aging. Story 64. Campania, in Italy, is the region where Naples is located. Among other reasons, 2,000 years ago would be 25 AD. The infamous eruption of Mount Vesuvius occurred at noon on August 24, 79 AD. I would have just over half a century to try to convince as many people in Pompeii, Herculaneum, Stabi, and other nearby cities as possible to avoid being in those locations on that date. and then find a relatively safe place to watch history unfold. Story 65. You couldn't choose over 2,100 years ago, so I could be an Etruscan? I guess it would be somewhere in the Polynesian Islands. I don't know a specific one because I have only started exploring the history of that region. I enjoy boating, fishing, and I prefer seafood. Story 66. I don't know what my peak biological age is, but I'm buying a significant amount of Bitcoin in 2011. I don't even need a high-paying job. Minimum wage at Taco Bell will suffice. I'll live in a tent. Story 67. Wherever there are as few people as possible, the fewer people know of my existence, the less I have to try to hide it. Story 68. Traveling historian starting in Rome and financial expert investing in sure bets. Once I survived until 1000 AD, I published History of the First Two Millennia Volume 1. When the year 2000 arrives, my descendant, really me, will publish Volume 2. I will, of course, write myself into the history books and be very flattering. Also, I'm going to own the Walt Disney Company. I have some plans for that. Story 69. Well, since anyone around me won't have a developed immune system like mine, and I am probably carrying some dormant virus, any place I go could lead to a mass casualty from a modern ailment. Story 70. Back in time to the Americas. Prepare the natives for the colonial wars. Once humanity sees no need for me, I will wait to confront an existential threat or something similar with my immortality. Story 71. I don't think it really matters. If by immortality you mean that one is still vulnerable to disease, we would die of something no matter what I do, whether it be a plague or smallpox. Story 72. To the central geographical area of continental Chile, it was already shielded by everything deadly because of the Andean mountains, and the climate wasn't too hot or too cold. There were many colorful potatoes, carrots, tomatoes, and avocados. They even had a fox or dog as a pet, so I'm probably part of the Inca Empire. Eat well and be happy. Story 73. 2,000 years? I might as well go to Jerusalem and see this Jebus figure for myself. Was he really a humble prophet or a charlatan? Story 74. I'm starting in Italy. I don't speak ancient Latin, but I studied it for a few months before switching to Spanish. If I can survive the first couple of weeks, I should be able to pick up the language enough to pass as a traveling foreigner. Story 75. Rome would be a great place to relax and see the sights before traveling throughout the Roman Empire and beyond. I'm immortal, so I have plenty of time. I could always have some fun and try to become emperor. Story 76. There is plenty of food for me and no predators. My biggest danger will be what to do when the Maori show up. It might not go well for me. Story 77. I would have enough time to learn Chinese before the Han Dynasty falls and the Three Kingdoms era begins. I would use my memories of playing Dynasty Warriors to predict the future, work my way to the top, and ultimately unite the land to become the new Emperor of China. Story 78. Probably somewhere in Europe. I am immortal and know things that will not be known for a millennium or more. 2,000 years ago, I could topple entire empires and religions with that kind of power. Story 79. Right here in Western Washington, there are plenty of fish and game, wild vegetables, and seasonal mushrooms. Additionally, there is always shellfish available, complemented by the moderate weather. Story 80. Hang out in Byzantium until around the year 1400, then travel to Italy and take a journey across the Atlantic to get chocolate and potatoes. Story 81. 2,000 years. Japan, indeed. They treated people who were different with respect, although their status diminished over time. Most other places lacked order and were more influenced by whim or power. I am not an expert, but I am well-read and confident in my reasoning. Story 82. I will spend some time in Rome, then retreat to the Swiss Alps before heading to California once the missions are established. I plan to acquire a large ranch where I can remain in seclusion. Story 83. Probably right here it makes it easier. When modern day comes around, I'm already at my house. You know. Story 84. Considering I would not be able to communicate with anyone on the planet, I would probably end up being a hermit for the first 1,000 years. Story 85. If I were immortal but could still be killed, I would go to Rome, become a merchant, and use my rough knowledge of history to avoid the worst areas. If I had superpower immortality like Deadpool, I would travel back in time to America. After the diseases I carry wipe out much of the population, I would try to organize the cultures along the Mississippi River using my knowledge of advanced technology and immortality, so that when Columbus arrives, he finds a far more advanced civilization than the Spanish waiting. Story 86. It would have to be a place where my appearance is not a problem. It makes sense to choose a location that is peaceful or at least free from invasions. Is there even one place in the entire world that hasn't experienced violence or been invaded over the last 2,000 years? Story 87. Constantinople offers well-timed vacations. The city features a relatively stable environment, with documented violent events that are generally avoidable. It has an exciting nightlife and pleasant weather. Story 88. Europe. I am a Caucasian man, and being a different race that people may not have encountered before can be challenging. I will stay in places where I can blend in, though I still need to be mindful of speaking the language and respecting local customs. Story 89. I am a black woman who needs glasses to function, and I am also a germaphobe. This sounds quite challenging. Story 90. The problem lies in modern identification methods. Before paper identification, your name could be Jack in one town and Jacob in another. Going back 2,000 years, I settle in Rome as the world changes around me. I know enough about history to manipulate it and become the man behind the curtain, a phantom of the opera for society. The game is simple. Write identical letters, recruit a series of individuals, of whom I am one among the crowd, pay them to inject modernity or erase certain elements from history. If I am fortunate and know my history well, I can install a shadow government beneath the apparent government, eliminate religions entirely before they form, and promote certain geniuses as the right hand of kings, with a left hand positioned to remove the king in secret if he fails to comply. Story 91. Probably the Middle East. There is a fascinating short story about a time traveler who goes back in time to see Jesus. Jesus singles him out in the crowd and tells him in modern English that he doesn't belong there. Story 92. Become a soldier, undefeated in the face of mortality. Do your best to fight on the winning side. Dress in imaginative outfits and use unconventional weapons. Story 93. I don't speak any language that was spoken back then. I guess I would try to find a place where I could learn the language more easily. I used to know a little Latin. Story 94. Why would I stay in one place for too long? I would face numerous challenges, so no one thinks I am immortal. I would not be seen as immortal if people thought I was a demon. I would take advantage of the lack of an information network to make myself scarce and start over. Wherever possible, I would hide out to be alone. It would be a long, hard life. I can assure you of that. Story 95. In 25 AD, probably in China, I believe they were the most advanced civilization, experiencing a golden age that lasted until about the 1200s when the Mongols attacked and took control for around 100 years. With my advanced knowledge, I would likely secure a position in the emperor's court. Story 96. I would go back and tell Jesus he better stop angering the people in power or else, but then I guess he wouldn't accomplish his mission. It's a good thing I can't go back there. Story 97. 2,000 years ago, there was no easy or pleasant way to live unless you were an emperor or part of the nobility. Story 98. I am immortal. I am going back to the early 1700s in the United States. I will establish myself as the God Emperor for life, which is a really long time. I will win the Revolutionary War and I will win the Civil War. You cannot kill me. I own everyone. Story 99. You would have to work hard to isolate yourself. Otherwise, disease could be fatal. However, you would quickly find yourself struggling with isolation. I would consider going somewhere with plenty of citrus fruits to boost my vitamin C intake and choose an isolated location to gradually adjust to being around other people. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.